Good morning. We are learning Leila Nishbas Mendel Mari Maskam Reuven Hashem Hashem Aliyah. We are on Kuf Mem Tesman Aleph, all the way on the bottom of the Amud, the two dots, Mephis. Mephis Adam and Badam. So the Mishnah spoke about the fact that a person's allowed to make lots with his children. So basically sitting around the Shabbos table, Yom Tov table, whatever it is, and a person's allowed, you have all these different portions of meat or chicken or whatever it is, you're allowed to go ahead and have, let's say you have like little pieces representing each family member from, I don't know, the Monopoly game, the hat represents this guy, the card represents this person, you're allowed to put them all in a hat and pick out one. Oh, you get this piece of chicken, you get this piece of chicken, you get that piece of chicken, you're allowed to do that, okay? So the Gemara infers, Im banav b'nei veso in, vim acher lo, that implies you're allowed to do it with your own children, you're allowed to cast lots, you're allowed to make a little lottery, but with other people, you're not allowed to do so. My time, why not? Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel said the following, Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, b'nei chavura makpidim zelzel. Let's say you have members of a group who are particular with one another, Ovrin, they will ultimately come to violate the following thing. So we're talking about a group of people who are not family members. They're people who are careful, that they don't want to get ripped off by their friends. In other words, they're the people who are particular with one another. And if they are going to be splitting up food, there's a whole bunch of prohibitions that they may come to violate. One of them is mishum mida, measuring. You're not allowed to measure things on Shabbos, okay? So you can't go ahead and, unless it's for medicinal purposes, which would be allowed, if you're allowed to take medicine, that is. But otherwise, you're not allowed to use a measuring cup or anything of that nature. And if you have people who are makpid, who are careful about one another, then you're going to go ahead and use this measuring cup. Not allowed. The only exception is when you're allowed to measure things, if it's being done for either for medicinal purposes, which is going to have its own allowance, because it's a rabbinic prohibition and that would waive it, but also for a mitzvah purpose. And therefore, those little matzah boards, those little measuring things are allowed to be used on Yom Tov because it's being done for a mitzvah. Otherwise, you're not allowed to use a measuring cup on Yom Tov, on Shabbos. Umisha Mishkal, they're also going to come to violate weighing because they're going to say, oh, yes, this piece looks like it's the same size, but maybe it's actually a heavier, more dense piece, and therefore they're going to start taking out a scale. In other words, people could be crazy like that. Umisha Minyan, or against counting, there are different possible prohibitions when it comes to counting. Let's say you bought 100 portions of something from me, and I paid you already 40. You're not allowed to go ahead and say, "Oh, you still owe me 60 pieces." That would be a form. That would be the counting that's forbidden. Umishum lovin uparin b'yom tov, or on account of borrowing and paying back. We saw earlier there are types of borrowing that are not allowed, and the types of borrowing that are not allowed. Similarly, if a person goes ahead and says, "I am paying you back," by using the terms, they don't just give it back to you, something they owed, but they actually go ahead and say, "I am paying off my debt to you." That can't be done on Shabbos or on Yom Tov either. So basically the point is, the Mishnah is trying to distinguish saying family members you're allowed to divide and measure with, because we're not afraid you're going to get into all these things, because they're hopefully more flexible with one another. Well, sometimes it's the opposite, right? But the point is that when it comes to other people, you can't go ahead and make lots, because you may go through doing so, there might get into arguments, they're going to get to measure, weighing, borrowing, counting, and paying back, and all those things cannot be done. We're now on the top of Kufim Tesman Bezu. Hillel, Afishum Ribis. And as Hillel pointed out, there's a form of ribis that could be forbidden. Remember, we said that most argue with Hillel and say that if I borrow a loaf of bread from my neighbor, I could pay them back with a loaf of bread. However, that's because you and I, the assumption is my neighbor I'm not going to be makbid with. But when people start dividing things and we're afraid they're going to be makbid with one another, and as Hillel pointed out, there, if I pay back with a loaf of bread, even though it's a minimal difference, there still could potentially be a concern, especially people who are not getting along with one another, and therefore you're not allowed to go ahead again and divide things with lots, with lotteries when it comes to people who are not family members. Ask the Gemara, Ihachi, Banu v'nei Vesom Nami. Okay, what about your own family? With your own family, you can run into all these issues. So the Gemara says, Banu v'nei Veso, Hainu Taima. The reason you're allowed to do lots with your own family, could Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Mutter lahalvos Banu v'nei Veso baribis. You're allowed to lend your own family members with interest. Allow them to taste the taste of interest. Now, what in the world does this mean? So what the Gemara is ultimately saying, before we get back to this particular statement, is that we're talking about family members who are all dependent on their parents. We're not talking about adults, right? Once we get to adults, you're right. You can't go ahead and do so. There's a concern that, adults, you start making these divisions. There's a concern that, they're going to do things in a way that is unacceptable and what's it called? And they're going to start measuring things and weighing things, etc., etc. But if it's people who are all dependent on the parents, then they don't really have a claim, right? You got a bigger piece of me. It's all mine, right? This is the famous label story, right? No, yeah, the story, yeah, they write the labels and everything. What do the parents do? Label and what's his brother's name? The brother. Okay, you thought you knew what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about, right? What do you mean? I just read it the other day to my kid. Okay, whatever. The bottom line is that it's like Label and his brother, I don't know his name, and they all put labels on their things, and the parents say, oh, you want to put labels on your things and you're not sharing? Fine, you won't get our food, you won't get our car, you won't get it. Basically, as long as you live in the parents' house, you don't really have a claim on your siblings, because at the end of the day, you don't own anything, right? So what the Gemara is ultimately saying, we'll get back to the ribbis in a second, is that you're allowed to do these lots in a family which is dependent on their parents, right? In that case, no one's going to start weighing anything, because the parents will roll their eyes and say, what are you doing? It's all mine anyways. I could do whatever I want. I can give this guy a huge amount, this one a small amount, right? But any time that it's actually going to be a scenario where people are not all dependent on the parents, then it's going to be allowed. So much so that even ribbis is going to be allowed in one's family. Why? Because if you lend your child money and they pay you back money, whose money is it to begin with? The money you give them was always your money. The money they pay you back with was always your money. And therefore, there's really no ribbis issue. So why would a parent want to do this? So the Gemara suggests over here that it's actually ideal to go ahead and do so, to show them how painful it is to pay back with ribbis. In other words, it's like to teach them like the hard way that it's not allowed. The Gemara in Bava Metzia ultimately rules against this and says you're not allowed to do so, even though on the one hand there's some educational value of teaching them how bad it is. On the flip side, there's bad educational value because they might come to say, oh, it's not so bad, right? And so therefore, we're not allowed to do that, even though there's actually no biblical issue because it's really all your money, right? It's all a joke, but it's all just, but the educational value of letting them taste the bitterness might be outweighed by the educational negative value of them, getting accustomed to lending and borrowing with, to lending and borrowing with ribbis. Okay, so says the Gemara, Ihachi, if we're talking about children who are household members, mana gedola keneged mana ketana nami. So you should be able to even have large portions against small portions, right? So again, at this point, the Gemara is distinguishing between, it's not really about family members versus non-family members. We're really talking about, we're saying that when there's a group of people all dependent on the owner, then you're allowed to do lots because you're not going to come to writing things down and weighing and measuring, etc. When it's people who are not family, we're going to run into all these issues. Okay? Make sense? Yeah? But now the Gemara is saying, but the Mishnah distinguished, if you recall, the Mishnah said, you're only allowed to do portions which are of equal size, more or less equal size. You can't do like huge portion, small portion, where it's going to be like more like exciting. In other words, you get the steak, you get the piece of chicken, you get the potatoes, you get the, the creme brulee. You're like massive differences that the Gemara Mishnah said you can't do. Why not? At the end of the day, they all belong to the Baal Habayis. Why can't it be done? So the Gemara says, Echnami. The Gemara says you actually are allowed to do that. The Mishnah is missing words. This is the way to read the Mishnah. A person is allowed to cast lots with his children and members of the household for portions of food at the table. You could even do a large portion, meaning like a more expensive portion, and versus a small portion, and that's all allowed. My taima, why is it allowed? Right, based on Rabbi Yehuda, we saw earlier, who said you're even allowed to lend interest. In other words, anything with your own family you're allowed to do because at the end of the day, it's really all yours. So you could even do big portions and small portions with your families. Okay, then the Mishnah continues and says, "In bana so in you're allowed to do so with your children or members of your household. Yes, in macherim lo, but with others you can't even do for equal portions. My taima, what's the reason? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, who said that there's all these violations that we spoke about just a moment ago that you might come into violation with people who do not belong to your house. Mana gedola keneged mana ketana af bechol achirim aser. Now, the implication of our Mishnah is what? Is that you can't do portions that are equal with people who are not your households when? On Shabbos. Right? Why? Because again, the issues were I'm going to measure, I'm going to count, I'm going to lend. That's all Shabbos prohibitions. But during the weekday, this should all be allowed. However, you're only allowed to do equal ones during the week, mana gedola keneged mana ketana, but large portions against small portions with strangers, people who are not your household, af bechol acher maser, is forbidden even during a weekday, my taima, mishum kuvya, because it is a form of gambling, right? Let's think about this. You come to a house, and you say, oh, we're having a meal together, and we say, oh, we get a whole bunch of dishes, and some of them are like lousy, some of them is a little carrot, and one of them is like a huge dish, and then we make lots to say who's going to get what. So the person who gets the little carrot is going to be upset, right? That's a form of basically we're gambling. You get the small thing, I get the big thing, and that's a form of gambling. And gambling is usher. The Gemara goes into detail elsewhere about what the prohibitions against gambling are. There's two possibilities, and they have a major nafkamina. According to because the Gemara ultimately says that a person who gambles is invalid for being a witness. Okay, so you have to know what. So that what one version of the one opinion of the Gemara says that anytime you gamble, you're ultimately stealing, because when you lose, right, the person who pays up, they don't want to actually pay up. They want to keep their money, right? So when they pay, they're giving you the money half-heartedly. They're not really giving the money. The money you have is stolen money. and therefore that money, and therefore the person who gambles is a stealer, right? A thief, and therefore the money they have is not really their money, and that's one possibility. The other possibility is that that the Gemara is not talking about when it comes to the gambling that invalidates a person from being a witness. The issue is not that they are stealing. The issue is that the Gemara says Emi Shuva Shel Olam. They're involved in a business which doesn't help the world, right? All businesses help the world in some way, right? All businesses help the world in some way, and therefore when a person does, so basically we treat this person as a regular person in society. Whatever job you have, you're moving the world forward in some way, right? But a person who gambles, in what way are they moving the world forward? All it is like this self-centered, like there's no intrinsic value to their work. They're not bettering the world in any way, and therefore that person, because a person lives their life, a person is like a professional gambler. This is their life. That's what invalidates them from being a witness. Okay, major discussions again in general about the permissibility of gambling and how to go about doing so. Certainly if you sit around with fellow Jews, it's not so simple. There are ways that a person could gamble. Certainly, if it's their profession, highly problematic. If it's not the profession, typically most poskim say like if you take the money and actually pay up ahead of time, then that would alleviate the concern of taking money that's not really yours. In other words, if you just had a bet and then the person has to pay up, that's where it's really concerned. If you put the money in the pool or whatever, then that would presumably alleviate the issue of stealing again. But if you're a professional gambler, it's going to have its own issue. Yes, Jesse.
What about the state lottery, which in theory the money goes to state education?
It doesn't. Okay, I don't know. Okay, So again, if it depends who you're stealing from, right? In other words, first of all, again, so there, let's just speak it out. If you bought a lottery ticket, and so again, that doesn't put you in yeshiva shalom.
You're not gambling because the probability of winning is unbelievably tiny.
Yeah, but also you're not yeshiva like you're not like your professional whatever it is, and you just bought a lottery ticket on the other hand, and there too, everyone paid up already ahead of time. So there's no issue with buying a lottery ticket. You're a fool if you think that you're gonna people who tell me they keep on buying lottery tickets because they're not doing well financially. I don't know.
That's why they're not doing well financially.
So poker is kosher.
What?
Poker is kosher. You put everything in the middle.
In a scenario, it could be as long as the person's not a professional poker player and not addicted to it. Okay. Yeah, so you could do that, right? Because there you're paying in, and therefore you do it. Again, if you live in Vegas, not live in Vegas, live in casinos, that's a problem. But if you go and you have a fun time for a day off, whatever, and go to the casino and lose some money, then you're just a fool and having a good time. It's just paying for the entertainment. But that's...
People buy in weight loss. Whoever loses the first 50.
Right, so you really have to pay in. You really have to pay in when you do those things, right? When you have a competition with other people, you really want to ensure that everyone's zeal one person. That person's going to hold on to the money. There was a fantasy team in our shul for a while, and so they learned about this. We went through the halachos, and they all paid in. One person held on to the money, and they did it.
And that's love.
That's love. But to pay in afterwards, who wants to give up the money, right? Okay, Mitzim Chalashim. The Gemara says Kohanim are allowed to cast lots. The Mishnah said they're allowed to cast lots for their things on Yom Tov, but not for portions. What's the difference between lots and portions? The Gemara says, "My avalo alamana." Supposed to mean not for portions. Rav Yaakov, Brei de Vas Yaakov. Rav Yaakov, the son of Yaakov's daughter, said, "Avalo alamana shel chol b'Yom Tov." On Yom Tov, they're not allowed to. On Yom Tov, the Kohanim are allowed to cast lots for their food on Yom Tov. They can't cast lots for their food on weekday. Right? The Gemara says, Pshita, of course they can't. Of course, you never do anything on Shabbos or on Yom Tov for weekday. Of course you can't cast lots for their food on weekdays. The Gemara says, your people, the Pasuk says in Hosea, that your people are like quarrelsome Kohanim. Kohanim apparently are very intense. And they fight a lot, and they argue a lot, and no, just kidding. But yeah, that's what the Gemara says over here. They fight a lot, and so to ensure that
my grandfathers were Kohanim. I come by legitimate.
I hear. So they fight a lot, and therefore if they fight a lot, maybe afilu dechol nami. Maybe we'll make a dispensation and allow them to cast lots on Yom Tov for portions of the weekday to alleviate fighting. Kamash B'lan, no, you're allowed to do so. Anything on Yom Tov is done for Yom Tov. You don't do for anything on the weekday. Okay. Once we quoted Rav Yaakov, the son of Yaakov's daughter. Interesting. Obviously, something's interesting over there in terms of who this person is, but it's a unique type of unique type of lineage, a unique type of person. So the Gemara now goes on to mention some other things in his name, which don't connect directly to what we've been discussing. Anytime a person is punished on your account, the person is not brought close to Hashem. So what this means, the Mefarshim explain, is that if a person goes ahead and davens that someone gets punished on their behalf, someone davens that someone else gets punished, then Hashem doesn't want to have anything to do with you. Okay? Where do we see this from? Okay, so let's explain what's going on over here. There is a king called Achav, who was a terrible king, and Hashem wanted to punish him. So there is a prophet who is describing what happened in Shemayim, and the prophet says that Hashem said, who's going to entice Achav to encourage him to go to Ramas Gilad, so that he's going to wage war over there and he's going to get killed over there. Okay, but basically Hashem wanted him to get punished. So Hashem said, who's going to do it? Who's going to go and encourage him to go there? Okay, so this one said, I'm going to go. This one said, I'm going to go. And then this one spirit came forth and said, I'm going to entice him. Okay, and how so? I'll go out, and I'm going to be a false lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. Vayomer tifata. Hashem said, okay, you go. Vegam tuchal tzei vasechen. And then go away. Hashem wants to punish Achav. And Hashem says, he turns to angels, who's going to punish Achav? And this one spirit comes and says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to cause all of his prophets to go prophesize falsely and encourage him to go fight in Ramas Gilad. And Hashem says, oh, you're the one? Good. Go. And then get out of here. I don't want anything to do with you, right? So why? Because through this spirit, okay, whatever exactly this means, through this angel, Achav is getting punished, even though Achav is deserving of punishment, but you are the one who is the catalyst for it. I don't want anything to do with you, Hashem says, okay? Avamrina my ruach, the Gemara said, what the Gemara, when explaining this passage, what's the spirit? Rav Yochanan zerucho shel Navos. This is the spirit of Navos. Okay, who's Navos? Navos is someone that Achav really, really had reason to be mad at Achav. Navos was a neighbor of Achav. He had a beautiful vineyard next door, a beautiful field, and Achav really wanted it, and Zevel, his wife, really wanted it, but he didn't want to sell it. He wanted to keep this portion, his land. So eventually Zevel went ahead and paid 2 people. She was a really evil queen. She paid 2 people to testify that Navos cursed the king and cursed Hashem. He was brought to Beis Din, he was killed, and he had this piece of land. Who gets the land? The king gets the land, and so he got the land. So basically, this is the spirit Navos who really, had a reason to be mad at Achav, goes ahead and says, I'm going to do it. Nonetheless, who might say, what does it mean say? Amarav Tseimi Mechitzasi. Hashem says, good, go ahead and do it, but then leave my environment. I don't have anything to do with you. Okay, ask the Gemara. There's no proof from there. It's not because of the fact that he caused someone to get punished, but rather because what was the way that he brought Achav down? Through lying. And Hashem wants to have nothing to do with lying. Lying is a terrible thing, and that's the reason, nothing to do, not because of the fact that he was the catalyst for the punishment of Achav, but rather because of the fact that he lied. Okay, Elihacha. So rather we're going to bring a proof from here, from a pasuk in the context of Nebuchadnezzar. Savata kalami kavod say gam atza ve'arel. Okay, you've been sated with shame rather than honor. You two drink as well as the uncircumcised one. So those words, you two drink. Okay, you two drink, meaning this negative drink, as well as the uncircumcised one. What's going on? Savata kala mikavod zen Nebuchadnezzar. You've been sated with shame rather than honor. Okay, meaning you're going to be embarrassed. That's a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. Shisei, drink, gam ata, you, ve'arel, and the uncircumcised one. So we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. He's uncircumcised. Who's the other person who's getting punished? Zed Tzidkiyahu. This is a reference to Tzidkiyahu. Okay, so what does it mean that Tzidkiyahu was captured by Nebuchadnezzar? And as we'll see soon, Tzidkiyahu was the king of Israel, king of Judea, and he caused Nebuchadnezzar to be embarrassed. And so you see, Hashem is saying that you're going to get punished in addition to Nebuchadnezzar. So you see, Tzidkiyahu was also punished. So the Gemara says, what kind of he says we can't bring a proof in there. He says that we're obviously misinterpreting it. Chada. First of all, Tekule Krab Nebuchadnezzar. First of all, the whole pasuk could be referring to Nebuchadnezzar and not anyone else. But further, Tzidkiyahu Tzadika. Tzidkiyahu was righteous. What could he have done to prevent Nebuchadnezzar from attacking him? Okay, so what's going on over here? What's going on and what's not being spelled out? What will be spelled out soon is Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonians conquered many countries, And Nebuchadnezzar's way of ensuring the subjugation of all of the countries that he conquered was he captured all the kings. He had all the kings with him, and he would sodomize them. He would sodomize them regularly in order to make sure that they were a nobody. And when he came to trying to sodomize Tzidkiyahu davens that he should be punished, and he was punished. Right? So first the Gemara is saying, oh, Tzidkiyahu is at fault. Now the Gemara is saying, what do you want him to do? He's being attacked. It's not like something happened to you a month ago or 2 years ago, whatever, and you're davening Hashem punish the person. That's not the same thing. Over here you're being attacked. Of course you're going to daven back, right? So the Gemara says, what did you want him to do? We're going to spell this out in a few minutes, but basically Nebuchadnezzar was trying to do something to Tzidkiyahu at the moment, and then he davened that Hashem doesn't do anything to him. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone again who is not doing it to prevent damage or pain or shame. They're doing it after the fact, okay? So the Gemara says, rather from the following pasuk, Gam anosh l'tzadik l'tov. To punish is for the righteous, not good. To punish is for the righteous, not good. That's what the pasuk says in Mishlei. Ein lo tov elo ra. Now the word lo tov means evil. Uchsiv ki lo kel chafetz rasha ata legur chara. You Hashem are a God who does not desire wickedness. Evil does not abide with you. Tzadik ata Hashem v'lo yagur b'gur chara. You Hashem are righteous. Therefore, an evil one shall not be allowed in your abode. What's an evil one? A tzaddik somebody who causes someone else to get punished. So this pasuk in Mishlei implies that someone who causes someone else to get punished, that is someone who is evil, and that someone has nothing to do with Hashem. Okay, now we go back to the psukim in reference to Nebuchadnezzar. My mashmei chalashim listen to furuhu. The Gemara, the Mishnah used the word chalashim to mean lots, and we say, how do we see that the word lots chalashim refers to lots? Tichsiv eich nafaltem mishmayim helel ben shachar nigdata la'aretz cholosh agayim. How have you fallen from heaven, O shining one, son of dawn? You have been cut down from the ground, the one who cast lots for nations. It's a reference to Nebuchadnezzar's downfall, and it says he refers to him as someone who cast lots. What were the lots that he cast? That each day Nebuchadnezzar would take a lottery to see which one of the kings he would engage in sodomy with, and that's so we see that term again. Chalashim is a reference to lots. Okay. It said all the kings of the nations lie in glory, even everyone in his own house. The day that Nebuchadnezzar died, then they all were finally able to sit in their glory. Meaning, that the day that Nebuchadnezzar died, they all finally rested from being sodomized. As long as Nebuchadnezzar was alive, no one was even laughing because they were so intimidated by him. But now the earth has become calm and tranquil. They burst forth in song. Until Nebuchadnezzar died, there was no song. You're not allowed to go into the house of that wicked man. If you were to go into a tour of Bavel, and someone told you this is the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, you're not allowed to go there because in going there, there are demons who are there, and when people come, demons move away. Demons only go into unpopulated places, and Hashem wanted there to be demons there. Okay, let's go a little bit further, a little bit more about Nebuchadnezzar. When Nebuchadnezzar wanted to sodomize Tzidkiyahu, his foreskin extended 300 amos, and it was very evident. It was seen everywhere. Shnemar savata kalami kavach segam atava arel. You've been stated with shame rather than honor. You two drink and have your foreskin. That's the word arel. Your foreskin exposed. Arel the gematria shlosh mias ave. The word arel is the gematria of 300. From Yudam Arav v'shash yard oser rash Gehenim. When Nebuchadnezzar went into Gehenim, it wasn't. They were really scared of him. Rashu kol yard Gehenim. All the people in Gehenim started trembling. Amru Shem alim shalem huba. Perhaps he's coming to rule over us. O lechalas kemosam huba. Or is he here because he's being punished? He's weak like us. Shnemar gamata chuleisech amanu elenu mshalta. Have you two become as weak as us, or have you been made to rule over us? Yatzav askava amra mimi naamta reda v'hashkava es arelim. Whom do you exceed in beauty? Descend and be laid to rest with the uncircumcised. In other words, Baskel came out and said, don't worry, Nebuchadnezzar is done with. He is not coming to rule over you. He is done. Shavas noge shavsa medeheva. Had the oppressor ceased, the golden one has ceased. Amrav Yehuda Marav shavsa umazusha amra. This nation Babylon has ceased, which used to say midod v'havei, measure your tributes and bring it. Because amri sha'amra me'od me'od below mi'havei below mida. So some say they used to excessively force people to bring tributes and say bring a lot, and some used to say and measure it. We want to know exactly what's being brought. And some said they used to ask for so much. They said don't even measure it, just bring it to us. We don't want to even measure it. Bottom line is that they were very overbearing to all those who who live near them. And the Gemara concludes about Nebuchadnezzar, Urvu Yatira, who Saftali, an additional greatness was given to me. Amar Rav Yehuda, that's Pasuk Amar Yivina, Amar Yirmiyah, Ba'amam Lamed Sherachav Al Ari Zachar. Nebuchadnezzar used to ride on a male lion, V'kasher Tanim Barosho, and used to tie a serpent over his head. L'kaim Hashnemer Gam Eschayas Asad and Asati La'avdo. Hashem said initially about Nebuchadnezzar, I'm going to give him wild beasts to serve him. He was great. He had this great reign with a lot of power, but ultimately a terrible downfall. Okay. We don't have too much time to unpack this. Have a great day. Okay.